Hello, my name is Phil Conrad. I'm the instructor for Computer Science 156 at UC Santa Barbara, and I am going to show you in this video how to create a pom.xml file from scratch for a Java project. In this case, it happens to be a Spring Boot console application, but this is, I think, a reasonable approach for a pom.xml for any Maven project. So to start out, I'm going to go to the website for the course, and under Topics, I'm going to open this Topics tab up, and I'm going to scroll down to Maven, and I'm going to find this pom.xml order article. And I encourage you to read this article on your own later. It's under Topics and then Maven pom.xml order. The idea is that a pom.xml file can have a lot of different things in it. And what I did was go out and find a complete list of all the things that can possibly appear in a pom.xml file. And there are 28 of them. And I found the canonical order. Canonical order just means the order in which they usually appear. Now, in fact, they can appear in any order. There is no restriction on the order in which they appear, but having a standard order and putting all of your pom.xml files in the same order will help you organize them and make it a little bit less mysterious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this group of comments. Each of these is in the syntax of an XML comment, and I'm just going to paste it into my new pom.xml file. And I'm going to tab that over so that they're all indented at the same level. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my minimal pom.xml. This is the very smallest pom.xml that's legal. And I'm going to start by pasting that in up at the top here. Now I've got my project open tag and my project close tab. I'm going to take my project close tab, put it down here at the bottom. Then I'm going to take each of these required elements. Model version, I'm going to put it under that comment. My group ID, I'm going to put it under the group ID comment. The artifact ID, I'm going to put under the artifact ID comment. And the version, I'm going to put under the version comment. And then I'm going to change all of these. So model version is always 4.00, at least for this version of Maven. The group ID, I'm going to change that to something appropriate to our course, edu UCSB CS156. For my artifact ID, this is going to be demo SpringConsoleApp. Let me make sure that matches the repo that I set up. I just actually set up a brand new repo for this. Actually, demo Spring Boot Console. It's not required that it match the repo name, but it certainly is less confusing if these are consistent. So I'm going to call it demo Spring Boot Console, and this will be version 1.0. And for now, that's all I need. That is a first, sort of a first draft of this pom.xml file. So I'm going to come over here and do a get status, and I'm going to do a get add pom.xml, get commit -m pc start new pom.xml file. I'll say a new minimal pom.xml file, and I will get push origin main. Great. So our next step is I am basing this demo Spring Boot console application on a tutorial from a site called Belding, BAELDUNG.com. Belding has a lot of great tutorials for working with Spring Boot, which is the backend technology we're using in this course for building Java web apps. So I found here a Spring Boot console application. So Spring Boot is normally used for building web applications. However, it is also possible to set up a Spring Boot application that doesn't actually have the web server loaded. It has all of the other aspects of the Spring Boot environment loaded. And that can be actually quite helpful in just sort of understanding Spring Boot a little bit at a time. So I've found this tutorial, and what I want to do is just set up this tutorial. The code for this tutorial actually lives in a separate repo, and that link to that repo is down here at the bottom of the tutorial. It says, here's our code over on GitHub. When you go to that repo, what you find is that this is one giant repo of tutorials. We're in Spring Boot module, Spring Boot deployment. But if I go to the top level of this, you'll see that there are just, I don't know, maybe a couple of hundred directories here, each with its own tutorial in it. And some of these directories are even collections of tutorials. In this case, under Spring Boot modules, you can see that there's a whole second level of directory. So there are probably just hundreds of tutorials all in this one giant repo. I want to just pull out this one tutorial. So I'm going to go here to Spring Boot deployment. Here's the pom.xml. And as you can see, it's kind of big. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the pieces of this that I need and put them into the appropriate spot in my pom.xml over here. So model version, artifact ID, name. Name is actually optional, but let's go ahead and put it in. And our name can be the same as our artifact ID. So I'll just call this name here, and this is name here. If you're wondering what name does or what artifact ID does, there is an article on the website for the course that has an explanation of every single one of these sections. And it tells you whether it's required or optional, and it tells you what it does. So for example, here's name, and it talks about name and how name is different from artifact ID. You can look that up on your own later if you are interested to know what each of these does. So coming back over here to our source, packaging war we are not going to use. That is a particular way of packaging when you do Maven package. By default, it creates a jar. Another option is a WAR file. That's a web archive. We don't need that. Heroku takes care of deploying the web app for us. And in this case, we're not actually deploying a web app anyway. So not sure why they have that there. Now, parent. This is actually kind of important. What a parent does is it basically says that this pom.xml can inherit, in sort of like an inheritance relationship in object-oriented programming, it can inherit from another pom.xml. And, I see already that we're going to have a little bit of a problem here because it wants the parent POM to be in the parent directory, and that's not quite going to work for us. So we'll have to show how we work around that. So that's good to know if you're using one of these tutorials. How do you get around this idea that the parent should be in the parent directory? We'll come back to that in a moment. Now, we have all these dependencies here. Let's do a copy and a paste on all of these dependencies. And we'll take that over here, and we will put that in the dependencies section. So we need to look and see where does dependencies come in this list. And here it is, number 23. So we're going to put the dependencies here under number 23. And then we will come back over here. And what else do we have? We have build. So let's take all of the stuff in the build section. And we'll take that. Oops, let's try that again. Everything in the build section. And we're going to copy that. One more time. Maybe I will learn video editing so I can take this out. Okay, third time's a charm. We've got our build selection selected, and we're going to put that in the build section. Build section comes after dependencies. Yes, number 26. So we'll put that in right there. The indentation's kind of messed up, but I believe that in VS Code, at least on Mac, I can do Shift-Option-F and it fixes it up. If you want to know the keystroke for that for other versions of VS Code, on the website for the course, I believe we have an article here under Topics on VS Code. Here it is. And there you go. So formatting, format indent code On Windows, it's Shift-Alt-F. On Mac, it's Shift-Option-F. And on Linux, for some reason, it's Control-Shift, letter I. I don't know why, but there it is. So let's go back to our example POM, which was here. We've got the build section in, and we finally have this profiles section. So let's go ahead and take this profiles section, and we'll put this over here under profiles, which is the last section. And then we have the properties section. So we'll take this properties section. Properties actually tends to be pretty early in the order. I believe it is here. Actually, number 21. It's not as early as I thought. We'll paste that in, and we will format everything. So this is good. I believe we can probably simplify this pom.xml a lot. I'm seeing things here like jQuery version and Bootstrap version. And guess what? If this is a command line app, we don't need jQuery, we don't need Bootstrap. We can probably simplify this a great deal. But before we start simplifying, it's helpful to put it in this canonical order. Another reason we're going to need to put it in this canonical order is we're going to have a problem with the way this parent is defined right here as being in the relative path. ... means one directory higher. And if you look in the context of this repo, it's basically saying, I expect to find one level higher than Spring Boot deployment up here at the Spring Boot modules level. Oh, look, there it is. That's the pom.xml I expect to find. But we're trying to build this repo as a single flat repo where the top level is our project. So having this at a higher level is not really going to work for us. But what we can do is we can take this. Oh, and look, see, it keeps getting bigger. Like there's yet another parent here as well. We can actually fold some of this into our same pom.xml. But, you know, maybe we don't need to go down that whole road just yet. Let's see what happens if we just try to compile without this parent. I think what we'll find is that there might be some things missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this out. And in VS Code, command / at least in Mac, we'll comment that out with commenting syntax that's appropriate for a .xml file. This less than exclamation point hyphen hyphen and then hyphen hyphen greater than is how you make comments in both XML as well as HTML. So we've got this commented out, and we'll see if it works. All right, so in order to see if this works, we're going to need more than this. We're going to need the code as well. So let's go back to this Spring Boot deployment is, this is articles about Spring. No, this is not what we want. What we want is, let's make sure we've got it right here. So this is the Spring Boot deployment, and hopefully this is the one that shows us a simple, okay, yes, here's a Spring Boot simple, hopefully, oh, here we go, Spring Boot non-web app. So this is the code we want. And I think I can see now why this pom.xml is set up with so many different things in it. This Spring Boot console application is one part of this code, and it has some other things in it as well, but this is the only one we're really interested in. So let's see what happens if we grab this Spring Boot console app. And I'm going to take this, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to make a source directory. So let's make a, actually this will probably be easier to do at the command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make dir -p source main java edu ucsb cs156, and then we'll call this, let's see, we'll call this Spring Console. And so the make dir -p creates the entire path all at once. So now we have a source main Java edu. We have a directory for our package, and in this directory we will make a new Java file. So under console, I will make a new file. And actually, I don't know if that's under console. Hopefully it is. If it isn't, we'll drag it to where it needs to be. And we'll call this, actually, we'll call this consoleApplication.java. Maybe even SpringConsoleApplication.java. And hopefully it is in that directory. Good. So open that up. First line needs to be package edu ucsb cs156 .spring.console, and then we will have public class Spring Console Application, open brace, and then inside here we will have public static void main string square bracket args, and this will be our main for our Spring Console application. If we come back over here, we see here's the code that goes inside our main. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that code and put it inside our main. You will see that up here at the top, we have some imports that we're going to need. I will grab all of those imports and put them up the top here. So there's our imports. I am going to grab this annotation, which is needed, and put that above our class. And this also needs to implement an interface called command line runner. So I'm going to put that on our class here, implements command line runner. We have a private static logger. This helps us get debugging output from our console app. So I'm going to stick that in there. And then this method, we're just going to take that method plus the comment that goes with it and add that here. And that is pretty much, hopefully all we're going to need as far as code for this Spring Boot console application. So let's see what happens if we come over here and try to just do Maven package. And we get some things missing here. We get that the build plugins plugin version for Spring Boot and Maven plugin is missing. Okay, so let's see if we can kind of figure out how to deal with all of this. A couple of things to know is that some of these dependencies like mail, data JPA, time leaf, I know already because I have some knowledge of how Spring Boot works. Those are dependencies that we do not need in this simple application. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and some of these dependencies we are not going to need. So I don't think, for example, I know for sure we don't need time leaf. Let's get that one out of there. These two I don't know about. I'm going to leave those in for now. Data JPA we do not need yet. Mail we definitely don't need yet. We're not interacting with any databases from this app yet, and we are not doing any mail. Actuator we don't need. H2 we don't need. Persistence API we don't need yet. Guava we don't need. I don't know what this is, but we don't need it. WebJars for Bootstrap we don't need. WebJars for jQuery we don't need. Cloud Context we don't need. And HTTP Client we don't need. Now, that got rid of a lot. And hopefully the number of error messages we get will go down. I am not as sure that we don't need these two. So these two I'm not going to delete. I am just going to comment them out. Now, let's see what's this message telling us. Oh yeah, dependency version is missing. Fair enough. All right, well then let us see. That dependency version is one of the things we would have gotten from this parent. So maybe what we can do is go over to that parent. So that parent originally would have been in ... relative to this pom.xml. So let's go back to the root directory of this pom.xml, go up one, and look in the pom.xml here. And what it's asking for is versions of things. And I'm just looking here, and I believe that we found those in this this parent boot 2, /parent boot 2. So let's look. If we go up one level higher and we go into parent boot 2, parent boot 2. Let's see if we can find it here. Here it is, parent boot 2. And here's a pom.xml. And you notice this directory, the only thing in it is a pom.xml. There's no code, there's nothing else. That's because this pom.xml is used as a parent of another pom.xml, which is used as the parent of the one we're dealing with. But rather than inherit this stuff, maybe we can just go get it directly. So I'm looking here to see if these versions are defined. And I am not seeing that, but I am seeing this parent right here. And I believe if we just take this parent right here and bring it over, and let's just stick that in. Let's see what happens. Because basically this parent is one that's getting pulled in transitively. And what I'm hoping is that this one will define some of those versions that we're missing. Now, if this happens, a build file was modified. You want to synchronize the Java class path configuration. To be perfectly honest, I have never really paid much attention to this. Sometimes I say never, sometimes I say now, sometimes I say always, and it doesn't seem to make that much difference. So I'm just going to close that for now. Let's see what happens when we try running Maven package again. All right, so we still get some errors. I'm going to clear my screen so that we can tell where these errors show up. Okay, so we see non-resolvable parent POM, could not find artifact com building parent modules, parent relative path points at wrong POM. Okay, so basically it did not like this. So let's take that back out. And I'm just going to say never this time. Let's do Maven package again. Now we have that the build plugins plugin version for Spring Boot Maven, WebJar, Starter Jar are all missing. So let's take a look at the Maven plugin down here. So this Spring Boot Maven plugin, it doesn't have a version. And I think we can easily resolve that by simply going to, if we just do a Google search on Spring Boot Maven plugin, and we do Maven Central Spring Boot Maven plugin, we get this website, mavenrepository.com. And if we look and see what is the latest version, it's 2.3.5. If we click on that, you see there is this little dependency thing that pops up here. And if I just grab that version right there, 2.3.5 release, and I believe that if I stick that in right here, after the group ID, artifact ID, and the version, I think that error message will go away. So that was the error message for Spring Boot Maven plugin. Let's see if that message goes away. I'm just going to leave a few blank lines. I'm going to do Maven package again. And at the top, indeed, that error message went away. So let's use the same approach for Spring Boot Starter Web. So if we look in this file for Spring Boot Starter Web, and we just look up what is the current version. So over here, I'm going to do a search on Spring Boot Starter Web. And I will see here it is. And the current version is also 2.3.5 release. So I'm just going to take that line that had the Spring Boot version. Where was it? That was down here. 2.3.5 release. And I'm going to put that on, let's see, Spring Boot Starter Web. So Spring Boot Starter Web is here. Drop that in. And Spring Boot starter test is probably the same. So let's take a look. Spring Boot starter test. Here it is. 2.3.5 release, indeed. So we'll put that here. Now, there is probably a better way to do this. I will confess that I am still on the learning curve when it comes to Maven and pom.xmls. But I'm pretty confident that this approach is going to get us to where we need to be. Let's clear the screen again and do Maven package and see where we're at. All right, so we still have some failures here. Source option 5 is no longer supported. Use 7 or later. So that has to do with the fact that in this Spring Boot Maven plugin, we want to tell it that we're using Java 11. And for that, we can go look at the starter code for pretty much any of the labs we've already done this quarter. So I'm going to go to UCSB CS 156. Actually, just go to our GitHub repo. And in here, I'm going to look for the starter code for lab 1, JPA01, starter JPA01. And in here, there's a pom.xml. And in here, I'm going to go down to where we have the, here's the Maven compiler plugin. And let's see, what we have over here is the Spring Boot Maven plugin. So it's not quite the same. So what we probably need to do is figure out how to tell the Spring Boot Maven plugin that we're using Java 11. Let's take a look at a different starter and see if it has. I think starter for lab starter JPA 03, because that was a Spring Boot project. Let's see if it's pom.xml. If we look inside it, and we look down in the build section. All right, so in the build section, that is front-end Maven plugin, generate resources. Here's Spring Boot Maven plugin. It does not have anything here about the Java version. Oh wait, here we go. Here we go. That's Maven Javadoc. That's not what we want. What we want is, let's see if we have so just looking, that's under profiles. We don't want profiles. Let's look under properties. Here we go. Under properties, Java version is 11. Let's see what happens if we just drop that into our properties section. So properties section is here. And while we're at it, I'm going to get rid of jQuery version and Bootstrap version and JPA and Guava and all of these actually, because I'm pretty sure we don't need those. Also, our start class is no longer this. Our start class is going to be edu UCSB CS156 dot spring dot console dot, and then we called it Spring Console. I think we called it Spring Console Application. Yes. So what this is, this start class is a property that will tell us what class has our main in it, so that when we do Spring Boot run, it knows where to start. So let's see what happens now if we try Maven. And let's do a Maven clean package just to get rid of anything that may have happened before. All right, so we're still having this source option 5 is no longer supported, use 7 or later. So somewhere in here, we are either explicitly or implicitly telling it that we want Java 5. And it's like, no, dude, no, not Java 5. So we need to figure out where that is. Where is it that we are sending that message, either implicitly or explicitly? And I don't see it at the moment. I think we have to explicitly tell it we want Java 11. And so here we did that with java.version. I'm looking to see where else we might need to specify that to get Java 11. So this is not going to be in the front end Maven plugin. That's for dealing with the JavaScript code. I don't think it's going to be in the Maven Ant Run plugin. That actually has to do with, again, the JavaScript code that's a part of this application. This is JavaDoc, and I know that it says source 11 there, but that is not part of what's going to be happening, going to be making this work. This might, however. Let's take this plugin to make the jar file executable, and let's see what happens if we put that plugin inside our plugin section. Now, this is one of the reasons that we have this sort of canonical order. We want to make sure that we're putting this in the same place. So we have a build section, and there should only be one build section, and then it's under plugins under build. So we have here a build section. It has final name resources, and then here's the plugins. And we're going to pop it here at the top. Then I want to make sure that we haven't duplicated, that we don't have another Maven jar plugin somewhere inside. Now we're going to need to fix up this main class. We'll come back to that in a minute. But first of all, let's make sure that Maven jar plugin isn't duplicating any plugins that we already have. And it is not. So we're going to put that Maven jar plugin in there. And this main class is actually from a different, that's from our to-do app. So we're going to take this out. And we're going to replace that with $, and this is going to help us refer to this property. So this property is called start class. So I'm going to do $start class, and that should take that value from this property called start class and stick it in there. So hopefully that will help us out here. Let's see what happens if we try this again. All right, so we are still getting this source option 5 is no longer supported, use 7 or later. So I think this is the moment when we may want to ask for some help from Google. But before we do that, let's try one more thing. So this was the starter for JPA03. Let's look at JPA02, which I believe was also a Spring Boot project, but a simpler one. So starter JPA02. And this might have a simpler pom.xml that could help us figure out. Okay, so this is using a particular parent, Spring Boot starter parent. Let's actually try this parent and see if we have better luck. So I'm going to come back over up here to the top, and I'm going to try putting in this parent, and I'm gonna take this one out just because that one's not gonna work for us. And let's take this out as well. So that's the parent that we used in JPA02. Let's give that a try. Let's also come down here. We've got our Java version 11 and our main class. So main class is what we called it here. We'll see if that shows up a little further down. So we've got now Spring Boot starter web, starter actuator, starter test, and that looks fine. So here we have a Spring Boot Maven plugin, and we have main class. Here we have an Apache jar plugin. This all looks reasonable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try just taking all of these plugins from our starter for JPA02, and I'm going to be kind of bold. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to put in here, put all of these in the plugins. I'm going to basically reformat. And then I'm going to take all of the plugins that were in the original, and I'm just going to delete all of them. I mean, we can always bring them back later, but for now, I'm just going to delete all of these plugins. Try the set that we used with JPA02, because that was a set of plugins that worked for us. It worked. It gave us Jacoco. It gave us PyTest. and it gave us working with Java 11. So I'm just going through here, making sure all that looks reasonable. Let's see what happens if we do a Maven clean package. All right, now we are finally getting to the point of actually looking at the code. So this looks like some good progress. This is saying that it can't find the symbol Spring Boot console application. So let's take a look inside. Yes, so Spring Boot console application. The name of this file is Spring Console Application. So it looks like we've got Spring Console Application. Somewhere, maybe in my pom.xml, I referred to Spring Boot Console Application. Nope, that says Spring Console Application. So let's see. Let's see if we can just do a search here on Spring Boot Console. So here, interesting. So that's Spring Console. Here we go. Here we go. Got it. So here's the problem. On line 13, we will talk about this in more detail at another time. But when you work with this thing called Logger Factory in Spring and Spring Boot, you have to pass to it the name of the current class. And we changed this name from Spring Boot Console Application to Spring Console Application. So I have to change that here as well. That's all. So let's try recompiling again. Maven clean package. And let's see. Cannot find symbol Spring Boot Console Application. Maybe it's in more than one spot in here. It's in here as well. So this also happens inside the Spring application.run. You have to give it the name of the class you're in. So that happened in 2 spots. Let's try Maven clean package one more time. And build success. Okay, so now that we have build success, I am going to do a get status. I am definitely going to get add my pom.xml. I'm going to get add my source directory with my Spring Console application. One of the things I notice here is that target is still tracked, and that is because I do not yet have a .getignore. That is one more thing that I want to show you. When you're setting up a new Spring application from scratch, you're going to want to get a good .getignore. And we actually have one here that we've set up for the course and that we sort of maintain periodically. On the website under Topics, if you go to getignore files, you will see that there is a candidate getignore for CS56 Maven projects. We should change that to 156. And it has in it a lot of stuff from like the standard set of things needed for Java, but it also has some things from the standard set needed for Maven, some stuff that's CS56, now 156 specific, as well as a few things that we've just found useful, like .dsstore. If you're working on Mac OS, these files get in your directory and it messes things up a lot. These files that are VS Code specific, you can see the target is here. So I'm just going to take this .getignore, I'm just going to take its contents, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to come over to VS Code, and I am going to make, up here at the top, I'm going to do actually no, I don't want that to be inside this directory. I want it to be at the top level directory. I have had trouble figuring out how to create a file at the top level directory because it seems to want to always put it inside. Maybe I have to unselect or select one of these files and then do that. Okay, I think that puts it at the top level directory. So .getignore, and then I'm going to paste that all in. Come back over here, get status. I'm going to get add my .getignore, get status. Going to get commit -m pc initial pom.xml and Java file for Spring Boot Console App demo, and get push origin main. Now, maybe I shouldn't have counted my chicken so soon. After all, this only compiles, so we haven't tried running it yet. But battling through just getting that pom.xml in a place where it would compile was pretty significant. Now, and what I wanted to show you in this video is kind of the process of going about that. So let's run this all the way back. We started because I want to create a simple Spring Boot console application. And I basically just sort of did a web search, Spring Boot command line application. And here's the first link that came up. It's a building tutorial. My experience with building tutorials is that they work pretty well. But they have this kind of annoying quality, which is that all of their tutorials are part of this giant mega repo, and all of the pom.xml files have their tentacles stuck into one another. They're not standalone, and that's really kind of annoying, because typically what you want is you want a standalone project that you can then use as the basis for your own project. So I've had to, in the time that I've been working with Spring Boot, figure out how to disentangle each of these tutorials from all the other tutorials. And I wanted to kind of share what that process looks like. So as a reminder, what I did was I started by going to the course website, going under topics, scrolling down here to Maven, to this pom.xml order, grabbing these comments, which are all of the parts of a pom.xml. As a reminder, each of these comments corresponds to a section in this page that describes, well, for the parts that are used, it describes what that part of the pom.xml has to do with. There are a number of things here that are not used in 56. And so if you want to learn about them, you can go out and look. Actually, I take it back. All of them are described down here at the bottom. So every single one of them is described. But the ones that are not used in 56, I put down here at the bottom. We will change this to say 156. And it explains what it is and why we're not using it. But if you might find a pom.xml out in the wild that you want to build off of, and it might have some of this stuff in it, and it's helpful to be able to see what it refers to. So I pasted this in. Then I took the parts of the pom.xml that I'm working with and pasted them into each of the separate sections. Then I sort of did some remixing, right? I went to pom.xmls that have worked for us. And the fact that the sections are in this sort of predictable canonical order helped me to do that. I think if we find that this actually compiles and runs, then we may be able to do some further simplification. So we did a Maven package before. I'm going to do another Maven. Actually, let me do a get status here. We're clean. Let me do a Maven clean package. And we should, after we do that, hopefully I can also do, let's see if I do Maven Spring Boot run. Hopefully it will run my console application. But I should also be able to run it by just running the jar file. And indeed, it ran my application. And it said, it started, and it executed, and the application is finished. It did actually start up a web server. There is a way to suppress it so it doesn't start up a web server. I will look that up and maybe do that in a separate tutorial or a separate video that's part of this same tutorial. But you see this executing command line runner application finished. That corresponds to the code inside this file. So just to review, there is only one source file in this entire application, and that we have this log, this public static void main starting the application. We did run, and then application finished, and we saw that show up on the console. And then we have this executing command line runner, where this would actually print out the command line arguments. Since we did not pass any, we didn't get any. But let's see what happens if I run this again. And this time I'm going to do, actually instead of using Maven Spring Boot run, I'm going to Java -cp target. And we should see in here, and we do, demo Spring Boot console jar. So I'm going to do demo Spring Boot console.jar. And then I'm going to give it the name of the main. Actually, before we do that, let me try just something else. I'm going to do Java minus jar target like this. I believe that this might actually just run our application for us because we specified the main, and indeed it works. You can see executing, command line runner, application finished. So that worked. And I can Control C to stop the application. Now I'm going to try it again, and this time I'm going to do foo bar fum, meaning these would be things I would pass in on the command line. And indeed, it printed out foo and bar and fum. So this is a simple demo of how we can set up a Spring Console application. This one did actually start up the web browser, but I think we can actually make one that doesn't start up a web browser. Now, you may say, well, why would we do that? One of the reasons is that if we want to just experiment with some of the ways in which the Spring environment provides a container for us to talk to databases of various kinds, to make web requests to other services, and we want to do that using the Spring libraries, it might be helpful for us to be able to focus on that separate from all of the web stuff, right? Focus just on one aspect at a time. So building a simple command line application in Spring Boot that doesn't interact with the web can be actually useful. So that's where we're headed. In this video, we were able to adapt the code from the building tutorial, and I will link in the description of this video. I will link to that tutorial as well as to the repo that we created in this tutorial. We're clean, so we have no more changes to make here. Oh, actually, I did promise that we might simplify the pom.xml a bit. I think I'm going to do that in a separate video just because I think this one is long enough, maybe too long already. And I think we're just going to declare victory on this one. We have seen creating a simple command line runner in Spring Boot that doesn't actually set up a web application. We've seen how we can pull in arguments from the command line. And we've also seen how to create a pom.xml from scratch and adapt a pom.xml with remixing parts from the pom.xml that we used for Java Programming Assignment 2 in this course, which was just a simple hello world in Spring Boot, but a simple hello world that uses Java 11 and uses all of our instrumentation, Jacoco and PIT for mutation testing, along with parts from the pom.xml that we got from building. Thank you for watching. Hope this was useful, and more content coming soon. Add on to the video here. I noticed after I stopped the video before that there were a couple of things. One thing that I had neglected to fix, and that is this line right here. You can see the video before it was start-class. But that really should be main class as I have it here. And the reason is that main class is what matches later in the pom.xml this main class. This is something that allows us to run the jar by simply doing, if I do Maven clean package, where we're accustomed to running from a jar file by doing java -cp jar file name. So for example, that would usually be something like target/myproj 1.0.0.jar. And then we would have to put in the full class name like edu, ucsb, SAS156, blah, 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 my main or whatever. And then finally the command line arguments foo bar fum. This is what we've seen in previous labs. However, we're going to do something completely different from that. We're going to do java -jar target, and then the name of this jar file is demo Spring Boot console jar, and that's all we have to do. We don't have to specify the name of the main class, and the reason is that this Maven jar plugin will put that main class, it will bake it right into the jar file. So the difference between doing java -cp and java -jar is that with Java -cp, it just says this is where we're looking for the classes, but we still have to tell it which main class we want to run. With Java -jar, we have baked into the jar what the default main class should be. The jar might still contain multiple main classes, but we're telling it this is the main that I want you to run normally. And then you can do foo bar fum and run, and it will run your application, and it will print out the command line args. So that's the second thing I wanted to show. First thing was that we wanted this line up in the properties to say main class. And by the way, this could be anything. It could be my main class, as long as this matches this and that matches this variable down here. It could be that. But I'm going to make it, I'm going to restore that back to just main class. And the reason is that this way the name of the variable matches the name of the element here. So that's just a little bit easier to remember. So I'm going to revert this back to main class and this back to main class using camel notation like that. And then finally, also, there was a long profiles section that we had from the original pom.xml. We're not going to need that. Eventually, we will need a profile section in some of our applications, but for this simple one, we don't need it. So I'm trying to get rid of anything in here that's, that's not particularly important or needed. So we will, I think, leave it there. So thank you again for watching. Add on to this video, I did find the code for how we can turn the web application off, and this is the code we need, and there is the place I got it from. I've also added a comment to the code which indicates where we got the bulk of the code from. So to illustrate what the change that happens when we include this code, I'm going to do a Maven clean package. And then we'll once again do a Java -jar target, and then we'll do demo Spring Boot console jar, and we'll put in foo bar fum, our command line parameters. And what we'll see is that now we have very simple application. It starts, it prints out the command lines, and it finishes. Doesn't start up a web server. We've also disabled the banner. If I come out that line of code right there that sets banner mode off, you'll see the difference when I recompile this and run it again. And the difference is that this time we're going to get that whole Spring banner, which if you like the banner, that's fine. But if you don't want that banner showing up, you can turn it off with that line of code right there. So in this case, what we did is we set up a new app, and we got a handle to it. This reference here, app, is a reference to this new Spring application that we created. Then we told it, turn the web application off, turn the banner off, and then run the app. And what that does is it just runs whatever code is right in this run method. We are running that. We're passing in all of the command line args. So that is this string ... args. And then we can simply go through args.length, print them all out. If we wanted to actually do something more interesting, this is where we would put the code. We'd put it right in this run method. All right, hope that clarifies, and we will once again end it here.